He saw two young, attractive girls. The girls bluntly suggested to him that there would be sex. Of course, Mr. Metek's eyes lit up. The condition was that Hi, welcome to another episode of Criminality Patrol. For me, like probably many of you, vacations are associated with water, with the forest, with, I would say, nature, sometimes wild. It's also a place, I would say, that's touristy, known all over Poland. Thousands of tourists come there. There's Augustów, a beautiful town. I was there this year and it reminded me of a story that's connected to that city. If you ever visit Augustów, and I'm sure many of you have, there's a majestic building there today called Albatross. Albatross is a legendary place in that city, surrounded by both good and bad legends. It's a place that has also been described in songs. Mr. Janusz Laskowicz wrote such a song, or sang a song called Beata from Albatross, or Seven Girls from Albatross. That song basically has two names, two titles. Miss Maria Koterska sang about the nights in Augustów. That's all, of course, true in those songs. Except that, yes, Mr. Janusz Laskowicz sang about Beata from the Albatross. This time there were supposed to be 7 girls. There weren't 7 girls, and none of them was named Beata. There were 2 girls, Wiesia and Ala, but they were also from the Albatross. And I invite you to watch this episode. There were actually 4 of them, 2 ladies and 2 gentlemen. Later they were called the Trojan Group. Why the Trojan Group? Well, it's from the last name of Wiesia, Trojan. Her last name was simply Trojan. Wiesia was born in 1949. She was the daughter of an alcoholic and a prostitute. She lived in Augustów. When Wiesia's father realized that, while her future, her upbringing is at risk because his wife, she didn't show any chance that she would change in life. He tried to save Wiesia. He took her to Łódź. They lived together and he sent Wiesia to a tailoring school. But Wiesia quickly realized that studying wasn't for her. She simply ran away from her father and went back to her mother in Augustów. She didn't want to be a tailor. She started living a life a bit similar to her mother. However, there was one thing in this story. Wiesia was a beautiful girl and she really made a big impression on men. When Wiesia grew up a bit, she got involved with her first partner. That partner was her Uncle Jan. Uncle Jan was a strong man. He used to work on ships. He was a sailor and in the Navy. He even had a high rank. Well, that's one thing. Uncle Jan, known as Dombrush, also had a tendency to... He was simply a sadist. He abused his subordinates. He abused the sailors to the extent that disciplinary proceedings were initiated against him. He was then demoted and expelled from the Navy. He had the nickname Black Devil. That's what they called him in the military. He was demoted. So you can see from this that Wiesia and her Uncle Jan, known as Black Devil, made quite a pair. Wiesia and Uncle Jan, of course, liked to have fun, hang out in bars, including the Albatross. They liked to drink, so they suffered because they didn't work anywhere. They suffered from a lack of money. One time as they were sitting in the Albatross, they started wondering where to get some money. They concluded there was such a family in Grabo. They're elderly people who are presumably wealthy. At least that's the impression they give. They decided to attack those people. On April 25, 1967, they took a hammer, an axe, and a sheet of paper with them. They got on their bikes and rode to Grabov. That's a town, of course, not far from Augusto. When they were already close, they stopped in the forest near the elderly people's house. They drank half a liter, made love again, and let's say, feeling strengthened, they went to their house. When the elderly lady opened the door, Uncle Johnny Sutton hit her on the head with an axe. He killed the elderly lady on the spot, and Wiesia, with a hammer, rushed into the bedroom. Her husband was lying there. First, she covered his head with that black sheet, and then she hit him on the head 3 times with the hammer. And she didn't have much experience back then. The older man was still alive. Uncle ran into the bedroom and finished the job. He simply killed him with an axe. They found about 20 zlotys and actually found some Prussian gold coins. Those coins, which were of considerable value, it was quite a haul for those times. So they could have fun with that money for a while. Almost for a year. A year later, it was 1968. While driving through the forest, they saw a mushroom picker. Mushroom pickers usually don't have much on them, but they decided to rob him. They killed the man. They simply beat him to death, and they took only a few coins from him. When Wiesia killed for the first time, she was only 18 years old. Her uncle, really, that black devil, wasn't much older, because he was 27 years old. Of course, the police conducted some kind of investigation. I mean, the investigation regarding those murders, but they didn't achieve much. They couldn't determine who the killers were, neither for the elderly couple nor for the mushroom picker. So both cases were closed. During that time, Wiesia even went to work. She got a job at a tobacco factory. That's where she met Alla, a woman about her own age. Both ladies took a liking to each other. They started to become friends. At some point, Wiesia even introduced Alla to her uncle, that black devil. Uncle and Alla, they really liked each other. They became a couple. Uncle, called the black devil for his sadism, beat Alla badly, for any reason and sometimes for no reason at all. But it didn't bother Alla at all. And you could see that this relationship just suited her. It was all pathological. Of course, it was fueled by a huge amount of alcohol, which they drank day and night. But that relationship was strange. At that time, there were 3 of them. It lasted because, as I told you, of course, they always suffered from a lack of cash. Uncle Johnny Shatan started to take more interest in Albatross. It was quite a prestigious place, I would say. A lot of people came there, people who had money. As a regular there, he knew this well. So he started watching who was leaving Albatross. He was mainly looking out for men who are elegantly dressed. And secondly, it was clear that they must have drunk quite a lot. He appears in front of Albatross in March. It's the year 1970. He watches who comes out of that place. He notices a certain man. The man staggers out of the place with unsteady steps. He's wearing an elegant suit. He follows him. And at the moment when they're in a deserted area, it was on the grounds of some factories, which existed back then. He attacks the man, beats him up terribly. He simply beat him to death. He robbed him of a few coins, and with that money he went to Wiesia, to Alla. And he bragged that he got the money that way, and then both of them. I mean all 3 of them by then. They came to the conclusion that attacking Albatross's customers, that could be a great source of income, but they were supposed to modify this robbery method a bit. Wiesia and Alla, mostly Wiesia, who was very attractive, she was supposed to be a kind of bait to persuade clients to have sex, and the rest was supposed to be done by Uncle Black Satan. First, the gang attacked Mr. Mieczysław. Mr. Mieczysław was leaving the place. That's when Wiesia and Alla showed up. He saw 2 young attractive girls. The girls bluntly suggested to him that there would be sex. Of course, Mr. Mitek's eyes lit up. The condition was that they had to find some secluded place. Indeed, they went and found a secluded place that the girls pointed out. At the moment when Mr. Mitek was getting ready for such romantic excitement, suddenly an uncle ran out of the bushes. He started beating him. Well, he beat him for quite a while until Mr. Mitek lost consciousness. They robbed him. Thinking Mr. Mitek was dead, they just threw him into a potato field. And they left him there. But it turned out that Mr. Mitek had a strong constitution. He lay in that potato field for a few days. Someone spotted him by chance. They called an ambulance, and Mr. Mitek was taken to the hospital. Since Augustov is a small town, the Black Devil also found out about it and went to the hospital. And before Mitek gave his statement, he offered him 10,000 zalotes to keep quiet. He scared him a little. He overpaid. Anyway, Mr. Michiswab agreed to take the money, and he won't say who almost killed him. Then they attacked Mr. Franciszek. That was on December 19, 1970. They beat him to death, and his body, maybe he was still alive then. They threw him into the Neta, which is a river, which flows not far from Augustov, January 13th, so a few weeks later. It was already 1971. They attacked Mr. Rizzard. A similar situation, first luring by girls, and then finishing the job, that is, killing this man by the uncle. His body, Mr. Rizzard here, it was also thrown into the Neta River, and the bodies of both the first and the second only surfaced from the river after a few months. It was already March 1971. A high alcohol concentration was found in their bodies, so I guess nobody really cared enough to conduct any thorough investigation. Anyway, since their bodies were already in an advanced state of decomposition, they had a lot of alcohol in their blood. It was concluded that these were simply unfortunate accidents. Around the same time, that's around March or April of 1971, another person joined the gang. It was Jan. Jan the Builder, that's what they called him. He came to Augusto to find a job. But he also liked alcohol. He enjoyed hanging out in bars. And so one day he met Wiesia. When they drank alcohol together, it was like a bolt from the blue, as they say. He simply fell in love with Wiesia. Wiesia fell in love with John, and they became a couple. And just like Allah, Wiesia wasn't bothered by the fact that John Budolaniec was also a sadist and an alcoholic, who also beat Wiesia, sometimes with a reason, sometimes without. But that didn't bother Wiesia either. Just like Allah, who was beaten by the Black Devil, they were already quite a remarkable foursome back then. John Budovlanec was supposed to go through a kind of baptism by fire. On Holy Saturday, April 9th, 1971, they decided to attack another person. This time it was John. A 60-year-old John had quite a lot of money. He often visited local bars and occasionally bought drinks for others. So they knew that John usually carried a lot of cash with him. Wiesia and Allah traditionally invited Jan for a threesome. When he started wondering where they could do it, they suggested an unfinished house under construction near Augusto. As soon as they entered the building, both the Black Devil, John Budolaniec and John Tuk, were already lurking there. That John, of course, I'm thinking about that John because, as you can see, there are many Johns in this story. But he started beating John mercilessly. When he was still alive, they took a brick and beat him to death with it. Jan actually didn't have much on him. They took only 5 zlotys from him because that's all he had. However, there was one more thing about all this. They were cunning enough that to each of the attacked husbands, they would leave some money. Sometimes they would leave jewelry. so that it would seem like it wasn't a robbery. When the militia found some money, they would find some small items. They would assume that it couldn't have been a robbery. After John's murder, well, that was a crime that couldn't be hidden because the body was found at the scene. It was clear that someone had killed John. The town started to buzz. People started talking about some gang being on the loose, especially the regulars and the patrons of other places like Albatross. They suspected that someone was killing the guests. Who, the previous day or the previous evening or night, had been partying at this place? People started talking a lot, suspecting things. Clearly, fear took over the town because people, even ordinary ones, suspected that they could become victims of such an attack. It was believed that all these attacks were motivated by robbery, despite the fact that the gang left certain things behind. Well, there was pressure. The militia got to work. They started searching, asking questions. Arrests began. A certain prosecutor was handling the case. He was also very pleased when he found 4 witnesses. These witnesses spoke that John, who was killed in that unfinished house, that evening, which was his last, he was seen in the company of a certain man. That man's name was Kozun. That Kozun drank with him. Then they left together. And that's when John was killed. Well, it's no wonder that all kinds of suspicion started to focus precisely around this Kozun. The prosecutor had 4 witnesses. But the thing is, those witnesses were Wiesia, Allah, Black Satan, and Jan the Builder. You see, they were clever enough that they simply gave false testimony, framing Kozun, who was completely innocent in all this. And in total, Kozun spent as much as 9 months in custody before everything came to light. After that arrest, after Kozun was taken into custody, things calmed down a bit in the town. The residents stopped talking. People became a little less afraid. So the gang could go back to their old ways and start killing again. The gang keeps operating. On May 30th, they attack Stefan. As usual, Wiesia and Allah lure him in. The other 2 kill him. And they throw the body into the water. In September, they attack Leszek, the driver. First, they threw him down the stairs of the place. Then they finished him off. And then they threw the body into the water. In December 1972, December 23rd, so right before Christmas Eve, Wiesia meets Victor. Victor is a tourist who came to Augusto. He wanted to relax. He also had a lot of money with him. As usual, Wiesia offers him sex. They take a taxi to the outskirts of the city. When the taxi leaves, Victor is attacked, killed, and the body is traditionally thrown into the water. Also, the bodies of those 3 others surfaced a few months later. It seems that the militia has chosen their old method. In other words, acting like nothing is happening. Because every time it was treated as an unfortunate accident. Earlier, it also happened that Uncle Czarny Satan went to prison. But he only went to prison. Thank you. Because he abused his wife. He finished this case, got sentenced, and went to prison. A kind of gap appeared because Jan Budowlanec wasn't as skilled at beating as Black Satan. Therefore, another sadist was added to the group. This time it was Jerzy, also a manual laborer, but basically only physical when it came to dirty work because he never really did anything else in his life. These last murders, meaning the murder of Victor and the murder of that man, Leszek the driver, were the work of Jerzy, Jan the Builder, and the 2 other women. And it probably would have gone on and on because I think neither the prosecutor nor the police wanted to admit that there was only one person sitting in custody. A man suspected of these murders, but it's probably not him. Or at least some members of that group are still at large and still killing. And it probably would have lasted forever. Perhaps the gang would have been completely unpunished if it weren't for Henrik. Henrik is basically a petty thief. When he was facing charges, when he was about to be sentenced, he started cooperating with the prosecutor. He told him that if the prosecutor was lenient with him, he would tell him who killed John. You know John, who was killed in that unfinished house. The prosecutor was a bit surprised, actually very surprised, because he had 4 reliable witnesses, but John and the Black Devil. Well, that's when the prosecutor realized that all 4 of those witnesses simply made a fool out of him and actually led him on false trails. Henrik talked about what he knows about the case. He talked about Wiesia, Allah, and the other 2, and only then did the whole case come together. And the previous stories about men pulled out of the river or bodies found somewhere, only then did it all start to come together into one logical whole. The investigation was, of course, circumstantial, and it seems that the militia handled many of these cases carelessly. These examinations were unreliable, and it was often assumed that people who were under the influence of alcohol were simply victims of unfortunate accidents. So it was a difficult investigation, but everything was actually starting to come together in a logical way. It was known because it was questioned that everyone, the 4 were lying, or actually by then the 5, that they were lying, that their explanations contradicted each other. It was clear that the investigation was heading in a direction where there would be serious sentences. And Wiesia also began to realize that she was fighting for her life. She was fighting for her life because Poland had the death penalty then. And Wiesia decided that she would tell everything, and she started to talk. One by one, she told everything she knew, from the murder in Grabov to the next murders. When Allah saw that Wiesia was explaining and telling everything, she joined her and also told everything she knew. However, of course, it cannot be ruled out that Czarny Satan, Jan Budowlaniec, and Jerzy could have acted on their own as well, that they had some individual crimes, or ones committed as a pair. Also, everyone who was in that courtroom was fully aware that we only know part of the truth. Only the murders that were discussed or had circumstantial evidence came to light. All in all, the entire gang, Trojan's gang, was charged with 18 of the most serious crimes, including 9 murders and 9 attempted murders. But we know that there were certainly a lot of these kinds of crimes. I would even say a lot more. In the end, it turned out that Black Satan and John the Builder were sentenced to death. And in 1979, they were hanged. Wiesia got 25 years. She died in Augustów in 2010. Allah got 15 years. What's happening with her? It's hard to say at this moment. That's how this story ended. She wasn't Beata from Albatross, as Mr. Laskovic sang, but Wiesia from Albatross, about whom probably no one will sing. Unless it's in some prison song. That's all for today's episode. Of course, subscribe to our channel, click the bell, and of course, take care.